Thank you for listening to my daddy's podcast. Please subscribe to our channel.
All I gotta say is, who that? Hey, what's going on, Who Dat Nation? It is yours truly, TJ Jones, the host of the State of the Saints podcast. And thank you so much for checking out this edition of the State of the Saints podcast, and we talk New Orleans Saints. On this edition, we got a special guest with us here on the State of the Saints podcast. He's been on here a few times, and he's always very open and willing to share with us some of the injuries to players in the NFL to give us a little bit more context about it. You can catch his podcast and his videos, the Injury Expertz, that are available on YouTube. And he is a sports medicine physician, a good friend of mine, Dr. Jesse Morse. Dr. Morse, how you doing?
Doing good. How are you?
I'm doing just fine. Thank you so much for being here. Really do appreciate your time, taking a little bit of time out to help us understand a few of these injuries a little bit more clear. Chase Young, the starting defensive end of the New Orleans Saints, went down with an injury at the beginning of the season. A week before the week 1 matchup versus the Arizona Cardinals, he was dealing with a calf injury. And, at first it seemed like it wasn't that big of a deal. It seemed like they kind of minimized the injury. Kellen Moore, the head coach of the Saints, kind of spoke a little bit about it, but it didn't seem like it was that big of a deal. But now we're 5 weeks into this, Dr. Morse, and he is still yet to practice. So can you kind of like provide us with a little bit of information about a calf injury and possibly what Chase Young could be going through?
So there's two calf muscles. When you look at the back of the calf, you see two muscles, but that's actually only one muscle. That's called the gastrocnemius with two heads. There's another muscle behind it up against the bone. Now that's called the soleus. The gastroc is traditionally what we think of as straining, and it's usually used for propulsion, usually for running or walking or whatever. The soleus is more so used for standing. Much more of a common injury, or more common in the NBA than in the NFL. Gastrocs are notorious for re-injury and for slow healing. Traditionally, if you were to look at it from the back, you'd see a split head. The medial head, or the one closer to the other leg, is usually where we injure it, usually lower, kind of towards the bottom, just above where the Achilles starts. Right. Now, any muscle that crosses a joint, like the hamstring, which goes down, or the calf, which actually goes up, is at a higher risk of injury. It has to do with stabilization. So the issue with the calf muscle, especially in a D end or any of these elite guys that are being very aggressive and explosive, is you need to put your foot, in the ground and be able to push off pretty much with every play. And when that calf fires, you're pulling up the Achilles tendon, which then pulls up the heel and allows you to go. Yeah. The tricky part is sometimes, because of the poor area of the calf that actually does not heal well in any age group, it just doesn't seem to matter. A lot of the times you can get 80% of the way back and you can set it back. If it's a partial tear, or we call it grade 2, then if you put them under ultrasound, which I often do here at my office in Miami, it looks like a bomb went off in there. It's like there's black fluid everywhere, and the tissue doesn't look anything like it should. Now, I personally either use PRP or stem cells like that to kind of speed up the recovery. If you don't do that and you just wait and hope, they don't always cooperate like you'd want them to. You might remember Christian McCaffrey dealing with this calf injury off and on for several years now.
Right.
And oftentimes they can correlate with Achilles issues because it is technically the same tissue from where it starts on the calf into the Achilles tendon and eventually into the plantar fascia at the bottom of the foot.
Yeah.
Now, the issue with this is that you need this to be explosive, but not just once or twice. You're asking him to rush 30, 40 times a game, if not more.
Right.
And not only just rushing, but against another force probably equally as strong or sometimes stronger. So there's all these awkward motions and movements and stuff. So it has to be ready. And a lot of the times it can be frustrating because it just doesn't heal like you want it to, or you're 60, 70, 80% of the way back and you tweak it and you go backwards and you have to shut it down for a couple more weeks. Then you have to start ramping back up. So calves and groins are notorious for this. Unfortunately, they're really calves are probably the most annoying in my opinion. Groins, these guys will play through to an extent unless it's no longer attached. Calves, they can't. They lose their power. It's like
Right.
it's like you lose a tire in your car. Like you can't do anything.
Yeah. A lot of people are saying that if the New Orleans Saints knew that there was a possibility that Chase Young would be out this long, why didn't they put him on IR? Dr. Morse, is there a chance that maybe the diagnosis wasn't as clear early? Maybe they thought that it wasn't going to last as long as it did. Like, what is the process? Like, how do you find that type of stuff out? How do you find out about a calf injury like that? Like, what are the steps for you to decide like how long a player is going to be out? Like, how does that work out?
So traditionally, when you see that, you initially evaluate the player either on the field, on the in the exam room, wherever you are. And then, it's usually pretty straightforward. Usually they're super tender. The grade twos are the moderates. You can't really put weight down. You're like walking with crutches a lot of the times, or at least early on. Sometimes they'll get an MRI. I usually use ultrasound. You can use an MRI as well if you want. Ultrasound's really sensitive. Some of the older docs just weren't trained in it, so they don't have they don't have access to it. But these guys all have access to it at this point. If it's just a grade 1 or a mild strain, then a lot of the times they don't want to shut them down for a month. The risk of missing a whole month is not really worth it, because what if you can come back in 2 weeks or 3 weeks, right?
Yeah, right.
And remember, they only have so many spots on the IR and set to return, so they have to kind of be selective about who. You have Foster Moreau, you have Taysom Hill, you have all these guys who were on IR and then kind of coming back. So there's only so many spots that you have available. If they're like, hey, this isn't overly concerning, is it as an IR candidate? No, probably not.
Right.
That may have changed a week or two later when he maybe re-injured it. And now you're like, now I'm kind of in a pickle because I wish I used the IR spot, but I didn't know what I know now, what I know then. And the IR doesn't include bye weeks. So if you have 4 games and there's a bye week in between them, you actually miss 5 games, right? So a lot of the times the guys will bookend the missing time, kind of like Lamar Jackson right now, likely to miss. What's basically going to happen is they will say, if it's 4 games, 3 games plus 1, they will keep them off IR and hope that by the end of the bye they'll be good and they'll be able to not put them on IR. So that's likely how it played out. Unfortunate, obviously, but calf strains are notorious for this. They're really frustrating.
Yeah, I know you haven't diagnosed him personally, but just him being out like 5 weeks so far, would you say that this is maybe a grade 2? I remember me asking you that on social media, and you said maybe like a grade 2. So if we are looking at a grade 2, what are the chances of him coming back, and when will we possibly see Chase Young?
So it's probably a grade 2 or was a grade 2, depending on where he's at right now. And then the question becomes, where is he at and what has he done to help it? These usually aren't surgical. So the question is, did they use regenerative medicine, like I mentioned earlier, or they not? And then how does he feel? Can he run without pain? Does he have explosiveness? Can he do it 20 times? Can he do it 50 times? These guys don't want to have to be situational where they bring them in every 10 snaps or something. They're not ready yet. So
Right.
when you bring them back, you want to make sure they're ready and they're back. And they want to be 80, 90% before they even get on the practice field.
Yeah.
Right. Because if not, you're like, okay, well, I'll do 3 days of practice, but then I'm going to miss this week. And then maybe I'll be ready in the following week. So
Yeah.
you're really trying to ramp them up as much as you can, not on camera per se. And then by the time they're ready to kind of return, they're just go.
Right.
In hoping that they don't have a setback. But, that's just unfortunately the nature of calf injuries. And I think that that's probably where he's at.
Yeah. Yeah, it's unfortunate for Chase Young. He was poised to have a really solid season, had some really good reports coming out of New Orleans saying that he was poised to have a good season. So hopefully he can get back on the field sooner rather than later. We'll go ahead and transition to another starter for the Saints, right guard Cesar Ruiz. He hurt his ankle. He has a high ankle strain. He'll be out maybe 4 to 6 weeks. He hurt himself in a game versus the Buffalo Bills. Just tell us a little bit about how those high ankle strains can actually affect a player, especially on the offensive line.
So, high ankle sprains are actually not common injuries outside of the NFL. These are rare injuries. These are not common. But the ankle complex, you think of as being below the ankle, right? Almost more so in the top of the foot. Not the high ankle. The high ankle is actually more so in the shin than it is in the foot.
Right.
So when you look, I happen to have a knee model here. So when you look at the knee, as you start to go down, there's a space in between the outside fibula and the main shin bone, the tibia. Well, there's not actually a space here. There's a thick ligament called the syndesmotic ligament. Now, that is responsible for keeping the ankle joint together.
Right.
Now, what happens is when you have a high ankle sprain, which usually means that you land kind of like this and someone hits the back of your foot.
Right.
So if it hits the foot kind of like the leg like this, then the toes jam and then that ligament spreads.
Right.
Now, there's 3 grades. There's grade 1, grade 2, and grade 3, pretty much like most things. The grade 1s suck, but they are not the end of the world.
Right.
The grade 2s are bad. The grade 3s need surgery, and there's nothing you can do. There's too much instability, oftentimes accompanied by a fibula fracture or an ankle fracture, we call it. The important thing to understand about a high ankle is that this is not a classic ankle sprain where you roll out. This is actually responsible for stability of the whole lower leg.
Right.
So why is this important? Because this has to do with rotation. So these guys can run in a straight line, and any of the guys that are running, right? Your wide receivers, your tight ends, whatever.
Right.
But it's the rotation and translation and changing of direction, because high ankle sprains are rotational injuries.
Right.
Meaning you can do stuff fine here, but when you plant and rotate, that's when these guys have issues, because that's when the syndesmotic ligament starts to spread again. And when it starts to spread, the ankle joint, we call the mortise, can't handle that much wiggle room, and it really hurts. So you'll see a guy like Tajay Spears, the running back for the Titans. He suffered a grade 2 in this first or second week of August. He still hasn't returned to the game yet. And we're in the first week of October. And he's still wearing a sleeve on it. Now, he's obviously trying to do different things than the lineman. But the issue with the lineman is these guys are huge, right?
Yeah.
And you have to understand not only what they're doing, but also the forces they're opposing. And that's the tricky part, is that when you are trying to kind of maintain, you can't do it.
Right.
Now, the Raiders lineman, Colton Miller, I think is his name, he suffered a similar injury, but he had it a little bit worse. I think he actually fractured either this or part of the lower ankle. So that would be the worst part of what Ruiz had. Similar, Joe Alt, the stud for the Chargers, had a very similar injury. And these are frustrating because usually sometimes it's not even in their fault. They may have fallen down and one of the guys landed on them and just jams their foot because their foot's kind of like this, and they jam their heel or their back of their foot into the turf. Now, if the toes are pointed down,
Mhm.
you on a cleat form, you might have turf toe. So you might injure your turf toe. If not, you may end up. That's what happened to CD Lamb. He ended up injuring his high ankle.
Yeah.
This is usually how they happen. Or this guy's not catching the ball, but if these guys are catching the ball, the classic hip drop tackle where a guy will basically fall,
Yeah.
and the weight of the tackler will fall on the back of the player's legs
Right.
and causing the guy's foot to go forward and the ankle ligament to kind of snap or sprain. Now, these, even a grade 1, a mild one, can take about 2 to 3 weeks to come back, depending on positions and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
The grade 2s are a partial tear. Usually these guys are on a wheeled scooter or crutches for a week or two before they even start practicing, before they can even start walking.
Right.
And then they finally start to ramp up. They ramp up. These are very frustrating injuries. I've talked to Elvin Kamara about this in the past. And he said, I was like, hey, when do you feel, it was years ago, when do you feel better after your high ankle? I think it was like March or something like crazy, because and obviously what he's trying to do versus what some of these other guys are trying to do, they're a little different, but
Right.
that's the issue, is that they lose a lot of their explosiveness. They lose that stability of the ankle and be able to kind of shimmy because of how important that ankle stabilizer is. So it causes the ankle to want to collapse medially or collapse laterally, depending on, which way they're going and which position they're going. So, if he's on the right side and if it's his right leg, he's got to be able to plant and hold. If it's his left leg, then he's got to be able to stabilize while the guy is probably trying to go around him. So you have to think of the biomechanics of the specific position, but also of what he's trying to do. And remember, these guys are basically bull rushing for 5-10 seconds, depending on the play. And then you got to do it again. And then you got to do it again. So the tape just doesn't do a good job.
Yeah.
It may last 10 plays or something, but then, you can't keep taping it. It just doesn't do a good job. So when you get back, you have to be ready to be back. And that's the tough part about high ankles. So usually these end up being closer to 4 weeks, and then they might struggle a little bit for like 2 weeks before they finally look okay.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, that sounds really rough, and a tough break for Cesar Ruiz. And you think about these offensive linemen, I mean, they're always getting their legs rolled up on because, I mean, they're going backwards. They can't protect themselves. So
correct.
Yeah, it's really tough. My final question for you, Dr. Morse, is about turf toe. You mentioned this because a lot of people, when they hear the word turf toe, I guess it sounds so minor, because when a player is out with turf toe, they're like, oh man, won't he come back in? Just for a few minutes, can you explain exactly what turf toe is and why is it so severe, and why do players miss a lot of time dealing with this injury? I mean, Trevor Penning, he missed a few games this season, the offensive lineman for the Saints, dealing with turf toe.
So turf toe is another injury that's not common in regular life, but common in the NFL. And a lot of it is due to the turf, obviously, but it's also due to the nature of how these guys are so big, so strong, and then they fall basically on each other.
Right.
Now, turf toe basically has to do with the joint of the thumb, I like to call it, but of the big toe. So on the bottom of the foot.
Right.
Now, the big toe is the stabilizer for the foot. It's basically like your thumb. So you can't do a whole lot without your thumb with your hand. Same thing with your foot, because it's responsible for anchoring you. Right. So if it's your right foot and you're trying to go to the right, you're going to push off with your toe.
Right.
Well, can't do that with turf toe, because what happens with turf toe is the bottom of the, what I call capsule or joint. It's kind of like a balloon. The bottom of the balloon starts to partially tear. And the ligaments start to slowly tear away. Now, if it's a grade 1, a mild turf toe, then they're still attached. They're just really angry. Right. The grade 2s are partial tears. They are miserable. The grade 3s are no longer attached. That's what happened to Joe Burrow. to give you a
Ooh.
comparison. Whereas grade 1 heading into a grade 2 is what Brock Purdy is probably dealing with. He
Right.
came back likely too quickly, re-injured it, and now he's out again.
Yeah.
So the issue with turf toe is that not only is that ankle have to be stable, but that toe has to be able to, if you want to think about being on your toes, well, what are you really on? You're really on your big toe. So if you can't stabilize that big toe, you can't do anything with the foot.
Right.
And a lot of the times it's so painful, and injecting these is awful. I mean, this is the most painful area in the body to inject. There's a ton of nerves and not a lot and not really anything else, just nerves and no fat. It's just it's a tough area. So it's
Yeah.
like, oh, just some of the guys will play with a carbon fiber insert to kind of
Yeah.
serve as a stabilizer.
Right.
But you have to be pretty much ready to go before that will even really do a whole lot.
Yeah.
And that's the tough part about turf toe, is that you literally look like you broke your leg, like you got shot in the leg, because it's that substantial.
Wow.
And because of how important that toe is for stabilizing the foot, it doesn't really do a whole lot without it. So when that toe is not cooperating, you're not very good, and you're more of a liability because you can't move as quickly as the opposing defender is going to expect you to move.
Right.
And that's the tricky part.
Yeah.
So it's just an unfortunate injury. It's an underappreciated injury. It's
Yeah.
way more substantial than people really think it is.
Yeah.
And just think of stubbing your toe and how bad it hurts. Multiply that times 30. I mean, it's a frustrating injury, and even the mild ones are awful. They're the only thing that would probably be comparable to a mild one is probably a mild ankle. They're very
Wow.
similar in terms of just the mild ones aren't really mild. Like the mild ones are awful. So that's kind of the way I would recommend, approach it.
Yeah. I mean, it's just one of those things, Dr. Morse, that a lot of people, when they hear it, it's like they don't understand the severity of it. And honestly, I didn't either. I've heard players, be out with turf toe, but it's like one of those injuries where people don't really understand what it is. I don't know if maybe it's just the term. It just sounds like it's not that big of a deal.
It sounds like it's stupid. It's like, oh, it's not a big deal.
Oh, yeah, ice it up.
Oh, yeah. No, unfortunately, that's one of the few that are very hard to play with, given where it is. You'd rather actually injure your thumb than injure your toe.
Right.
Because, you might be able to kind of get away with a cast or something.
Yeah.
Can't do that with your foot, because you're trying to translate all that energy and all these subtle movements. These guys are so gifted balance wise that if they can't do that, then they just look like, they're drunk. They look like they're a liability.
Right.
And these guys have to be at 80-90% for them to serve the role that they're trying to. If not, the backups look better than them.
Yeah.
So that's why, and by week 5, 6, 7, none of these guys are healthy. It just depends on who's the healthiest.
Right.
So it's unfortunate. And a lot of the things, even if they're not in the injury report, doesn't mean they're not dealing with it. They're just not bad enough for them to comment on it.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I'm happy that you provided clarity on that. I think that a lot of fans of the New Orleans Saints, and also just NFL fans in general, would appreciate that clarity, because, like I said, it's just one of those injuries that a lot of people don't really fully understand. But Dr. Morse, thank you so much for your time. I really do appreciate you stopping by here on the State of the Saints podcast. But before you go, can you let everybody know how they can get in touch with you, and also your channel, the Injury Expertz?
Yeah, so I cover pretty much all NFL injuries. I kind of focus on what I call offensive skill players, just because there's so many, and I cover all the teams. So it just, there's 80 to 85 people on my list right now. It's week 5. And then I have a couple different avenues. I have videos that I put out, YouTube, TikTok, on X. I think they go Instagram as well. And then on the injuryexperts.com with a Z, there's a full injury report. There's an extensive injury report for like a couple bucks a month. And then there's a full breakdown with injury histories for pretty much every major player offensively, to give you an idea of what their injury history looks like, how many injuries they've had, how many games they missed, what the severity and the specifics was. So it's really a deep dive into injuries that we just keep stacking and building on, and we update it daily. So
Yeah.
it's a nice resource that you can use to comment on all of the injuries. The comments on there are made by myself, so the approach may be a little bit more advanced than you're just going to get from your beat reporter or whatever, because I'm analyzing them from video, from just history and other things, and then translating them into kind of reading between the lines, I call it. So if that's something that you're interested, a lot of the people that like it for fantasy, they like it for betting and some of the other stuff, but you can use it for kind of whatever you want.
Right.
It's just one of my passions, and I like and enjoy doing it, although it gets a little exhausting.
I can imagine. I mean, doing sports medicine and all the while doing something like this. But Dr. Morse, we appreciate it because once again, I mean, what you're providing is clarity that a lot of fans don't necessarily get from beat writers. I mean, when you look at those injury reports, I mean, when you just see calf or ankle, I mean, to understand those type of injuries, I mean, they have to be able to go to an expert like yourself. So really do appreciate your channel, the Injury Expertz. And also make sure that you follow Dr. Morse on X at Jesse Morse. He provides information there as well. So thank you so much for your time. We really do appreciate it. And I'll see you down the road. Hopefully not too many times. Hopefully the Saints can stay relatively healthy throughout the 2025 season.